Alright guys, it's time to start on the exhaust. Here's some of the spare parts that I've got lying around from other exhaust projects. This is what I'm thinking about doing. I'd like to do an X pipe across the middle, but it's going to be a little bit difficult to finagle that. I still might do it depending on if I think it's going to increase the power enough. But for right now, to make it simple, I'm just going to do an exhaust with a resonator right there and then a 90-degree turn and have it come out the side here, just cut a hole in the fiberglass body over there. That's the plan. What I'd like to use for resonators, these are Walker 53601s. I buy these suckers in bulk. They're like 14 bucks. What I like about them is that they're 2 1/4 inches diameter, so they'll fit the factory exhaust parts that are on the Crown Vics. And let me show you inside here. Now, I don't know why, but these are some of the best sounding resonators I've ever used. And I think it's because you see how there's only the baffling on one half. So what they do is they really take down some of that high-pitched, annoying sounds, and they give it just this deep rumble that sounds amazing on everything I've put them on. So those are $14 a piece when you buy them in bulk. I think you can get them on Amazon singles for like 21 or 22 bucks. It goes up and down. Now I do have some other choices for exhaust mufflers here if those end up making too much noise, because I do have to get a license for this thing. And occasionally when you're doing a new construction, they'll get on you about having a really loud exhaust. So I might need to put one of these mufflers on there to get it through, and then I'll switch it back. Just don't tell anyone. But these are just 2 1/4 inch pipes. So what I normally do is I'll buy a kit. I'll put a link in the description, but it's just a build your own exhaust kit, and it works really well. Gosh, I don't know how much they are. I think they're like 120 bucks for like a basic kit, but I'll put that in the description. So these are extra pieces that I've taken off after I've done a bunch of projects. For some reason I use these used the least, so I end up with a bunch of those. But what I'm going to do is just get it welded up temporarily, see how it sounds. As long as I like the sound, then I'll weld it all up fully, and then I'll cut the holes in the fiberglass. We'll be good to go with the exhaust. Alright guys, I've got the passenger side exhaust out right now, and it's all tacked up as you can see, and I'm getting ready to weld it. I wanted to show you guys something interesting here. If you notice, right here, there's a little bit of a step up, right? Now when I was holding it together to try to weld it, this side came out just a little bit farther out this way, and then the top was a little bit farther that way, given just that little step. Now, from the inside you can't really tell much, you know, it looks fine, but the issue is going to be that the O2 sensor goes in right here, of course, and the last thing you want is to have the exhaust gases tumbling in a way that causes them to kind of create a little mini vortice in there and just kind of tumble. You don't want any tumbling. You're just going to want that exhaust to flow as smoothly as possible. So I was about ready to put the sleeve over it and just weld everything, but I'm just unhappy with it enough to where I'm going to fix it. So what I'll do is I'll just cut these 4 little tack welds I've got here, and then I'll just move it over just that little tiny bit. It'll be easy to do because I'll still have the marks from the welds, so I'll just line them up again, move it out just a little bit. I'll weld this as a full seam, and then I'll slide this over it, and then I'll do a weld on each side of it. And that's just because I just don't want this to ever crack. Of course, you can get away with seam welding it like this as long as you use an adequate hanger close enough to it and keep it from vibrating. It's the movements that are going to kill you on it. All right, I've got it all welded up. I think they came out pretty good. You can see these are the factory welds, and then these are mine. Pretty close. A little sloppy over here, but they'll hold. I don't know, factory was a little sloppy there. Alright, I've got the exhausts hooked up. Everything looks good. There is a little hole that's right there. I guess it's a big hole. That's for the EGR line that is not going to be used on this setup. So I've got the hose here, or the tube that bolted in from the EGR, and I'm going to cut the head off right here, and then I'll flip it up and then just fill it in with a weld and then use it as a plug, and it'll go back in the exhaust and we'll be good to go. Alright, here it is. I think it came out pretty sharp. So now I just need to install this and the exhaust will be at least ready to test. Alright, I've got my fuel filler neck in. It's just a rubber hose that's designed for fuel that has a 45-degree elbow in it. It's just 2 inches on each side. I've got the metal mount ready to weld to the tube here. I am going to remove the fuel tank before I weld this so that I do not light myself on fire. And then while the fuel tank is out, I need to do some mounts to the tank to get the tank properly mounted to the frame. Haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do it yet. I'd like to do 2 mounts on the bottom on each side, and then I would like to do at least 1 mount on the side here. Alright, now the exhaust system and the fuel system are done at least enough to test it. The next 3 things that I have to do to have this driving under its own power are the battery box, the brakes, and the cooling system. And I've been dreading doing all 3 of them because they all have their own little problems, but I've got a rough idea on what I want to do for the battery box. I've got a pretty good idea on what I'm going to do for the brakes, and I have not figured out the cooling system yet. Because it is so far, I'm probably going to have to do some type of an intermediate pipe, and I just haven't figured out how I'm going to work that out. So for the brakes, pretty straightforward. I'm just using some brake lines and couplings to extend it. No real issues there. The hardest part is going to be bending it to fit exactly right and then flaring it for the different types of fittings that I need. For the cooling system, I may end up just running a loop from the thermostat outlet to the intake for the cooling system down there on the bottom. That way I can just have some coolant in the engine just to move it around, but eventually I'll obviously have to figure it out. So that's what I'm dreading the most, so that's probably what I should start on first. Alright, here we go. Alright, I think I've got the cooling system figured out. This is where I'm going to put the remote reservoir. I'm going to weld this tab to the tube here to hold it up and then do a little bracket on the bottom. And then for the hoses, let me go ahead and throw this up on the lift and show you how I ran those. Alright, here's what it's looking like down here. Just 1 coupling on the bottom and then 1 coupling on the top. Other than that, I just used, whatever radiator hoses I could find over at O'Reilly's. This is the stock lower, but then this is, I don't know what vehicle they're off of. I just go in the back and kind of look for something that matches. But it was, I believe, $32 for both of these and then $4 for one of the couplings. I had another coupling lying around. So 36 bucks to get the hoses all figured out. Alright, time to get started on the brakes. I've decided that I'm going to start at the ABS control module with the brake lines that I've got down there, and I'll just start bending it and see if I can use the existing clips to hold it in place, and then send it over here to the factory brake lines. And the reason I'm starting at the ABS is because that way I can figure out exactly where I want them to end, and then only then will I make the final bends in the factory lines, because you see how they're going all kinds of different directions that I don't need them to go. So I don't know if I want to do like a 90-degree bend back here or what, but I'll start at the ABS, start working them towards that direction, and then once they get close I'll figure out how I'm going to make that union. Alright guys, let me show you how the brake line's looking. So here's the first brake line that I've done. I think it came out fantastic. This portion here is going to the ABS module, and then this portion in the back goes into the master cylinder. Now what I had wanted to do was I wanted to run this section right here from the factory. Now because the master cylinder used to face this direction, this would have gone directly into the ABS control module, and then this small braided portion would have allowed for the flexibility between the body and the frame. That would have been picked up right here by this. I wanted to keep this. I thought that would have been nice. The issue that I had is that the location that I put the master cylinder in, really there's so many bends and they're all facing the wrong direction. They're just moving it farther and farther away. Now I had thought about straightening them, and I tried straightening it a little bit on the first one, but generally speaking, when I'm working with brake lines, if I do have to re-bend one, what I'll do is I'll take a bend that's 45 degrees or less. Like right here, 45 degrees, I'd straighten that out, no problems. Once you get to 90 degrees, you can straighten it out. I mean, I'm sure guys do it all the time. I really don't like doing that, and I hate the idea of going from a 90-degree bend, straightening it out, and then a 90-degree the other direction where you're flipping it all the way around. And the reason for that, I have a little experiment for you guys. Everybody knows when you're popping the tops off of these, it's not the first bend or the second bend, but when you want to tear it right there, you just keep going back and forth, and it eventually pops off. So that's the kind of movement that you want to avoid on really anything that's experiencing metal fatigue, but specifically brake lines. You just can't have it bending back and forth in the same direction. So if the body was flexing, I'd be more concerned about it. I might use some type of an aftermarket flexible line, but I'm going to run a hard line, and I think I'll be all right. And then now I have to do the other one. Now for this one, I am going to have to use a union because the line that I have is just a little bit too short, and it makes more sense to do two than it does one. So I'll jump on that now, and then I'll show you how it looks. All right, this is how it's looking like on top here. I'm really happy with all the bends. I was able to reuse the factory little clips here on both sides. Holds it in there nice and tight. And then let me throw it up on the lift, and I'll show you what it looks like underneath. Alright, this is how it's looking like on the inside. They clear everything really well, actually. I'm happy with it. Alright, I want to show you guys a little trick for when you've got two lines running parallel and you want to kind of clamp them together, but you've got a little bit of space in between. This is something that I came across when I was working on this race car, and the guy had this done all over the place, and I actually really liked it. So basically, you take just a small length of hose, in this case it's just vacuum line, and then you run it like so. So you run the zip tie through the center, like this. And there you have it. I think it's a fantastic idea. So this is how I zip tie them now, pretty much. And it is awesome. It works out great. It keeps that nice little space. It's just perfect for when you've got a little bit too much space where you don't want to clamp them both together. And I thought it was ingenious, so I'm passing on to you guys. Alright guys, it's time for my least favorite segment. Austin fixes his own mistake. In this segment, I'm going to be fixing a mistake that I made to this brake line. I don't know how well you can see, but this brake line has a cut in it from a grinder that somebody, who shall remain nameless, dinged up when he was grinding this part here. Now, I thought I had moved this far enough away. Obviously I did not. I nicked it. It's probably fine. It will probably still hold pressure, but probably is not good enough when I will have my wife and kids riding in this with me. So what I'm going to do, luckily there's a union relatively close. I'm going to unscrew this here. I'm going to cut it past here, flare this fitting, and then install a new short length. Now what makes this really annoying is that I do have one of those little wing nut auto part store brake flaring tools, but they suck. And in this case, I really need to put a solid bubble flare on that, and the only way to do that is with the benchtop unit. So unfortunately, I need to unclip this entire length of brake line back here just to put a flare on this end, just to put that little union in there. And all of this is because I was just a teensy bit sloppy with the grinder, and I just didn't take an extra second to move them away or put a piece of wood in between a part that I knew I shouldn't have ground. But this, unfortunately, the removal of this and the fixing of this, that's my punishment for that mistake. So let's get it over with. All right, so I was pressure testing the cooling system and it kept coming back as 0. I couldn't get it to hold any pressure, so I decided to fill it up with water because I couldn't tell where the leak was coming from. And if you see, it looks like it's coming out of the side of the radiator. And this is a bummer because the radiator was fine before, but the way these things are made is that at some factory somewhere they've got the aluminum radiator and then they've got a polycarbonate, or I think it's polycarbonate, maybe it's polypropylene. Anyways, they've got this poly end and there is a rubber seal that goes the length of it all the way around, and then a machine crimps it. And when it is sitting dry for a while, it's not uncommon for those gaskets to just kind of dry up and shrivel and then make it where it doesn't seal anymore. So luckily, because this is a Crown Vic, parts are incredibly cheap, and I bet Rock Auto has this for like 30 bucks. So I'm going to see if I can clamp it down a little bit tighter on just these little clamps, just with a pair of channel locks, and we'll see if we can get it to seal at least long enough to test it out. Well, she's holding pressure pretty good. You see it's still showing 5. It's just a hair under. Maybe it's at 4 now. This side's fine. And now this side started leaking from the same spot. So stupid. So I'll clamp this up with these channel locks down there, and it'll be good to go, at least for testing purposes. Alright, so I told you that what I needed to do to have it drivable is the cooling system, the brakes, the exhaust, the fuel system, and the battery box. I haven't done the battery box yet. Cooling system's good to go. The brakes are all hooked up. The exhaust is done, and the fuel system is figured out. The box is mounted. I just need to put the tank back together. What I had forgotten about the brake system was that I need to finish welding this plate here. I need to weld it here. I need to weld it here and behind right there, and then I need to finish seam welding a couple welds on this box. So I'm gonna have to pull the box away, finish welding everything, mount it to the vehicle for the last time, and then once I do that, I can hook up the brake system, bleed it, it'll be good to go. One thing that I forgot to mention was the power steering pump. Now, in order for the cooling system to work, the water pump needs to be hooked up. For the water pump to be hooked up, I have to route the belt. Once the belt is on, it's going to spin the power steering pump. When the power steering pump is spinning, obviously it's going to be under pressure, which means I need to hook up the reservoir, fill it up with fluid, and then test it for leaks. So that's another annoyance. But I guess that's the last real hassle. Other than that, it's just tightening up some things that I already know how to do. So I guess let's figure out where we're going to put that power steering reservoir right now. All right, so I was able to put the power steering reservoir right next to the coolant reservoir, and all I had to do was run just one new hose, and I had that lying around. So easy peasy. Alright, last night I finally got the brake box all welded up. You can see it is hard mounted to the vehicle now. I did cut a little groove here just to make a little bit more clearance for the steering. It wasn't touching, but it was awfully close. On the bottom side here, I added in a couple supports just to strengthen that box a little bit, because obviously since we don't have the flexible brake lines, I want everything to be as rigid as possible. So now is the time to install the power booster master cylinder. Once the master cylinder's in, I can fill it up with fluid and then I can bleed all the brakes. I also started the process of making the battery box. I've got it here. Let me show you how it's gonna look. I have decided I am going to put it where I initially wanted. It is going to sit right about right here or so. And I'm going to use this tube here, like so, for a little extra support on the bottom. So that should be it, other than filling up the power steering reservoir. That should be it to get this thing running and driving. So let's get to it. Alright, I've got the battery mount all done. You can see I added support to the top, and then it has, of course, the square tubing on the bottom. For the battery tie down, I've got this portion here hinged to this strap, and then just a tensioning bolt here with the wing nut. I am going to build a box that goes over it, probably aluminum. I'll bend that up later, but this will be good enough, at least for now, to test it out. Alright guys, I think I'm ready to start it up. Let's just go through real quick and double check. Got the battery box in, it's hooked up, fuel tank's in, got that all connected. The electrical's good. Both of the exhausts are good. I do have the O2 sensors in there. Let's see. Power steering is filled. The coolant reservoir is filled. I've decided that I'm going to start it up without the belt on it initially, just to make sure that it runs okay. And then I'll put the belt on, and that's when I'll check the power steering pump for leaks. I checked the brake lines, no leaks. Everything is bled, so we do have brakes. I double checked that. Yeah, I guess that's it. Ready to start it up, and then we'll see how it sounds. All right, let's see. It's good enough right now to start the process of getting it ready to drive away. So I will need to install a seat, of course, and then I will put the belt on. Once the belt is on, I'll start it up again before I drive it, double check for power steering leaks, make sure I got the air bubbles out and whatnot. But yeah, other than that, it's about ready to start driving. I don't have the accelerator pedal hooked up yet. This is going to be quite annoying. I might have to do that by hand until I have the metal skin around, but we'll just take this one thing at a time. So first things first, let's get the seat in, get the belts on, and go from there. Alright guys, that's it for this week. Thanks for making it this far in the series. I wanted to test drive it a little bit more for you, but unfortunately without the power booster hooked up and with I think a pocket of air somewhere in the brake lines, it was just a little bit sketchy to drive too much further, and I don't have tags for it, so I couldn't take it outside the property anyways. Now as far as the next trophy truck video, I'm expecting that to come out in 2 weeks, and I have a different video coming out next week that I'm editing now that I think you guys will really like. And I know a lot of you guys have been sharing this, and that's really helpful. I'm starting to get some new subscribers, and that's really cool. The channel is growing, so I really appreciate that. If you haven't, maybe share it with a friend. Otherwise, stay tuned for next week.